So you take a horror fantasy film helmed up by the director of 2 Friday the 13th films, written by the future creative mind behind the Riddick franchise, and you got a nice little cult classic that spawned a franchise of its own, with Julian Sands and Richard E. Grant in Warlock. In 1691 New England, a powerful warlock has been captured by witch hunter Giles Redfern and awaits his execution by a tribunal of priests. Yet when an unexpected storm converges on the Massachusetts village, the warlock vanishes into a mystical whirlwind with Redfern in tow. Transported 300 years in the future, the warlock crashes into the Los Angeles home of Cassandra and her roommate Chaz, who both believe he's a wayward drunk. Yet the next day, the warlock violently attacks and kills Chaz, cutting off a finger and biting off his tongue. The warlock soon visits a channeler, whom he uses to speak to Satan himself, who tasks him with reassembling the pieces of his own Bible. He then uses the eyes of the channeler as a guide to the pages. Later, the police give Cassandra the terrible news about Chaz, but when she returns home, Redfern interrogates her about the warlock's whereabouts. While his erratic actions spook Cassandra into calling the police on him, it's after the warlock hexes her to age 20 years per day that forces her and Redfern to work together. Thus, using the warlock's blood, they're able to begin tracking him across the country. Along the way, Redfern reveals that the warlock killed his beloved wife Marion and has been intent on seeing justice brought to him. Yet when catching a hex symbol painted on an Amish farmer's barn, Redfern discovers pages of the Grand Grimoire, a powerful book of magic coveted by witches. This book supposedly contains the true name of God, and if said in reverse, it will unmake all of creation. While Cassandra is able to regain her bracelet, which breaks the hex on her, the warlock escapes with 2/3 of the book. Thus, Redfern and Cassandra have no choice but to chase down the remaining pages to both a church and cemetery in Boston. Yet the warlock's intellect and power leave him not far behind, forcing the witch hunter and the LA party girl to stand against this unholy evil and prevent him from bringing about the end of everything. So Warlock saw its original theatrical release in Australia, the United Kingdom, parts of Europe, Japan, Brazil, all well ahead of its US theatrical release on January 11th, 1991, grossing about $9 million at the box office, which was actually a pretty nice profit for Trimark Pictures, despite the fact the film cost $15 million to produce, but was produced by New World Pictures, who was founded in 1970 by Roger and Gene Corman, and kind of sold off in the early 80s to another entity, and they went off and made films like Children of the Corn, Wanted Dead or Alive, Creepshow 2, Hellraiser 1 and 2, but as they poured a lot of money into this type of film, eventually by the time the thing got up to finishing production, the whole thing, the entire company was in very, very bad financial straits, and they could not afford to release the film and distribute it theatrically. And so they started selling off different assets, the entire company, and restructuring things and all that type of stuff. And so the thing ends up on the shelf, at least for US theatrical distribution, until 1991, where the entire thing was produced in 1988. So it sat on the shelf for just over 2 years after completion because of that entire debacle there. So as New World spent $15 million on the film, Trimark picks it up for a song, maybe about $1 billion or something else like that. Like, it's all gravy to them now. They rake in money. $9 million at the box office, they can cash in on the home rental markets, all that type of stuff. Wonderful thing for them. Like, just prints money for them in that type of way. Just like an easy hit for themselves. But the genesis of Warlock comes up to us from writer David Twohy, who's credited as D.T. Twohy in the film, but this guy would go on co-write The Fugitive. He would work on Waterworld. He'd work with Charlie Sheen on Terminal Velocity and The Arrival, and go on to create the entire Riddick franchise with Pitch Black and all the successive sequels and spin-offs and animated stuff afterwards, all that type of thing. So, built up himself very nicely. He's also done a whole bunch of other films that really gotten a good amount of praise for himself, so he's a solid talent. It definitely shows his worth later on in years, but he worked on the entire script, kind of built up the entire idea himself, And there was some a little bit more extravagant ideas he had in the original screenplay they kind of pared down for the entire film, despite the fact that it had $15 million behind it, which is like almost double the budget like some of the Nightmare on Elm Street films at this point in time, which is paying about maybe $7, $8, $9 million in the whole thing at the most. And those got a lot more elaborate effects and all the different things going on. Like, it's really packed full with a lot of different like flashy visuals, stuff like that. And this one feels not quite as flashy in that regard, but one way or another, had to pare things down for certain things here and there in that regard. But getting the director involved was Steve Miner here, who had come up through the Friday the 13th films. Worked a little bit on the first film with Sean Cunningham. They went off and directed part 2 and part 3, and then goes off and does House with Sean Cunningham in that regard. So, good kind of track record. He's kind of building himself up in a very kind of a steady fashion, kind of like a reliable guy. Especially when you look at Friday the 13th part 2, which I think is one of the best films in that franchise, because it's directed with a lot of great suspense, real strong handle on the genre overall. I think that Miner came with a lot of knowledge of the genre for that one. Really incorporated a lot of ideas he got from like Mario Bava, a lot of different things here and there. So there's a lot of deep down ingrained kind of horror things into his background and knowledge in that regard to kind of build himself up into a film like this that has a little bit more effects work in terms of visual effects, stuff like that here and there, but kind of get a handle on the tone and the genre and all that type of stuff. So a good handle to have on the whole thing. And he's kind of worked on films like Lake Placid, Halloween H2O after this, but most of his career after this would be mostly in television, but still a steady hand regardless in that regard. But actually shot everything in the United States. Worked stuff in Salt Lake City and Boston and Los Angeles and stuff like that. So they kind of bumped around all over the place, kind of shooting things here and there. And the kind of the actual locations where the entire film was being set is kind of cross-country chase against the Warlock in that regard. So interesting thing how they went about that and kind of just embrace that entire quality and not kind of try to double a lot of things like they would do today, like trying to like shoot up in Toronto and double it for a whole bunch of different things. Kind of shot in the authentic locations they were trying to make for the film itself. But one particular location they shot was for the opening sequence in late 17th century Massachusetts, and again, actually shot in Massachusetts, at a place known at the time as Plymouth Plantation, and apparently the people who gave him permission to shoot there didn't quite know the full context of the entire film they were kind of shooting here, with the Warlock having certain very satanic overtones in that regard, feeling a little upset in the aftermath and everything like that, but that's in the aftermath, that they already got everything shot and got to move on and do the rest of the entire film there. So Steve Miner is the director here. I like what he does with the film, the approach he has to the material here, because going to the late 80s, tone could go any way in a horror film at this point in time. They could get really cheesy, it could be very serious, it could go off in very different directions. But I like the fact that Miner, he grabs it with a real respect. He feels like he's got strong actors, he's got a good story here, and it feels the weight of the story can really hold its own. You don't need to take these two characters who've been thrust forward in time and play a bunch of gags of them being fishes out of water and stuff like that. There's little light things here and there with Redfern, but it never does anything to degrade the characters. It never does anything at the expense of the integrity of those characters, and that's so much important. He understands those characters need to maintain that integrity so you can believe in them. And you have that sense of the Warlock being a threat and Redfern being this genuine altruistic hero you have the entire film, and you have to maintain that for the audience to kind of feel the threat overall, feel the stakes are real, and feel for the characters as they go through. If you kind of start making anything jokey and silly and stuff like that, you kind of lose the plot. So I like the fact that Miner finds that quality. He also makes sure that the film moves at a very nice pace. The narrative is very lean. Benefit of Twohy's screenplay, but it's also the fact that Miner knows how to make sure there's a consistent pace from one scene to the next, and everything connects and flows from one another, because that helps with the urgency of the entire plot. Keeps moving forward, the momentum keeps going. There's just the fact that we have to keep acting on the plot to keep up the Warlock or keep ahead of him. So it's just simple type of stuff, and he does that very, very well in the film. Shows his aptitude for, again, suspense, horror, all that type of stuff. Just really has those moments in the entire film where we really see the craft come through very much. And it's very interesting on the crew fund the whole thing, because in terms of David Twohy, the editor on this film, David Finfer, would become the Oscar-nominated editor for The Fugitive, and the cinematographer of the film, David Egby, actually shot the original Mad Max, but also go on to shoot Pitch Black and Riddick for director David Twohy. So it's interesting crossroads and stuff like that to see like these guys kind of all contribute to the same project and go off and kind of reconnect in different ways in that regard on different projects. So it's a nice little type of treasure to find these kind of intersections of talent and see them weave back and forth through the rest of their careers. But I think it all comes together really well. Like Egby's, he's not doing the most dynamic stuff possible. Like, but when you see the entire thing where he's got a few interiors to work with, like when he's up in the attic of the kind of Amish barn or whatnot, he's got to play with a little painting with light, stuff like that. Give a little shadow and light here and there to kind of give a little atmosphere and stuff like that. It's like really get some locations, some little kind of sets and whatnot, kind of little places here and there. You can kind of play with the angles and kind of play with depth of field and some of the lighting here and there. It really shows you a nice little quality he has here. He can really kind of bring it out and complement what the story's bringing forward on a tonal level overall. So really nice pairing of all these different talents to really kind of pour into the film and really kind of make it look very nice in that regard and feel like a very good horror film in that regard as well. But you've got to talk about the cast and Warlock, and there's two towering talents to especially talk about here, but I just want to tip my hat to the supporting cast here because you got such a small core cast overall. So I want to kind of explore this just a tad bit here because I like the casting and all the kind of qualities that the supporting cast bring to the entire film, which is not a whole lot, not terribly notable, but I like the fact that they're like the priests in the 17th century. Cast a bunch of British actors because, well, they're new colonial people. They just came over, so they would be British. So it's a nice kind of type of quality of casting there for those characters, and especially when you get into more modern day Los Angeles and then go off to the countryside. You got the kind of the Amish guy there, the farmer in that regard, and he's got a certain quality that feels genuine about him having that kind of knowledge he could share with Redfern and knowing about the hex symbol and the witchcraft, all that type of stuff. So little things here and there, but they're really kind of nice quality casting choices to fill out these roles very, very nicely. But Richard E. Grant and Julian Sands are just fantastic talents, and they just hold this film up so very well to such the levels that's been praised for overall for all these years. But even though Sands is our title character, I want to talk about Richard E. Grant as Giles Redfern because he's such a rock solid talent here. Like everything he does in the film really gives that its core, that kind of weight, that gravity of the entire film, because he's the one who creates that gravity. He's the one who's expositing the information to understand what the threat is overall and all the different things. Like I love everything about what he makes the character feel authentic. The Scottish brogue accent, everything they had with the costuming, all the little tools he has for the witch hunting, all that type of stuff. Like the entire package of the character just feels like he did just step forward through time and just like as authentic as you possibly get because he's just so committed to making that character feel that way. But he's also such, like I said, altruistic hero. He's got a compassion to him, despite the fact that he's also wounded and kind of a tragic backstory. Because as it kind of gets kind of pulled out by Cassandra in the entire film, Warlock killed his wife Marion, and he talks so like glowingly about that woman, and just like it just something that ripped his heart out. That this guy, this embodiment of evil, killed the woman he loved, and so that creates that extra layer into the film that makes it a personal story. It's not just a guy like, oh, this is the bad guy, I gotta hunt the bad guy because I'm a good guy. It makes it a much more deeper story in that regard and gives him something more to play as an actor, and certainly something for Sands to play off in that regard to kind of relish the moment when he's kind of like, at the end of the film, kind of torturing and kind of bargaining with Cassandra's life against Redfern and stuff like that. Just give those little sprinkles of character, backstory, or whatnot. It just creates so much for an actor to sink themselves into and really find the core motivation of what the character is all about. But he still has those moments to be heartfelt and kind of be compassionate and saying these words to Cassandra like, I will not let him harm you. And you believe it because the performance is so absolutely fantastic. And so, again, very real. It just feels like it just has that tether overall. It's like that's such a mark of a very seasoned actor who knows inside and out how to bring those qualities out in such a great character in that regard. I think Grant is just absolutely fantastic in this role. It's like he is the heart of the story that makes you interested and engages you in the story so much, like it pulls you into the story as he's going through it. He's got such a wonderful charm on screen, just like it's everything wrapped up in a fantastic package, channeled through a fantastic actor. You couldn't have asked for anything better, having Richard E. Grant just embody this entire hero of the film. I absolutely love it. I could watch him and Sands all day long playing these characters. Wonderful stuff because Sands, like living hell, own the hell out of the Warlock role. I'll see you have a sequel to explore it further, but him and Grant are just, oh man. This is the pairing. This is the chemistry. This is the sparks going off between the two different guys. Like, oh yeah, once they get face to face, like you're gnawing at the bit and whatnot to really kind of see these guys really show it down. Really great stuff. Just like the fact that Sands, he's so delicious in the role. He's never really playing over the top, but he's got moments where he's relishing it, having the entire thing of, that he's having fun with the character, but he's not pushing outside the bounds of where he needs to be, because he can play everything so subtle, so down, but be so menacing, so evil, so threatening overall. You just feel that so much for this character. Like, he can say almost nothing on screen for a couple of scenes, but the presence he has is so ominous. The film doesn't have a lot of gore to it, which I'll get into later, but there's like certain things, like they're heavily implied and told to us that this is what Warlock had to do this, to get the flying potion. He's got to boil the fat of an unbaptized child. You don't have to see the child getting massacred. It's like, that this guy did this thing. But Sansy's got that swagger, that charm, that beauty on screen. It's like he's so attractive and kind of just invites you in and kind of entices you and stuff like that. But just as soon as tear you apart, limb from limb, all the time. So it's like fantastic type thing just to embody it. Because if you're not going to show as much, you need an actor who can make you believe that he's capable of that stuff and be frightened of him. And just like Sands, he's got it down pat. So much in that regard. And he kind of bat around doing the entire thing. Apparently, like, he didn't kind of read the script for a long period of time. Kind of felt like maybe this was just another kind of slasher film or some other big gore film that didn't have a lot of something to it, not a lot of substance to it in that regard. But eventually, like, he was very attracted to the entire thing. And even Grant did kind of audition for the Warlock, even after I think Sands was maybe kind of in the talks of the whole thing. But where these guys landed in the entire film, I wouldn't ask for anything, because they're just so exactly perfectly cast at both these roles. Fantastic pairing overall in that regard. And sadly, we did lose Julian Sands a couple years ago to very unfortunate circumstances, but I like the fact that he contributed to the Veteran Video Blu-ray and talked about the entire film. Was very much appreciative about the opportunity to play the Warlock twice even, and the fact there was a fan base for that and everything. They just very was appreciative of there being a fan base, of people appreciating his work in the whole thing, and kind of just everything reciprocating in that regard. So it's nice the fact that a little role they kind of did off of the entire thing, they kind of got into a film that got delayed for like 2 years and maybe almost didn't see the light of day in certain parts of the world, and just like hit a mark, because it's such a film that hit nicely at the box office. They lived on the rental market so very strongly and just kind of built and stuff like that. So it's like a nice little gem for any actor to kind of get. You can play a really good role that people appreciate, and even get to play it again is a very nice thing in that regard. But moving on to Laurie Singer in the entire film, who I always felt maybe was kind of weak link in the entire film here. Maybe certainly comparatively, because she's not carrying as much dramatic weight in the story here as Cassandra with a K. I found her kind of surprising this time around. Like, she carries the way she has to in the film. Is a little more the lighter character, a little more the kind of snark, the kind of jokey stuff, kind of the ones kind of making more of the comments about these guys being kind of strange and weird or whatnot. Those are the guys out of time, but not as put out as she is. It's kind of nice, subtle juxtaposition in that regard, kind of flipping on the kind of expectation. I think the guys who are out of time would be kind of, all over the place and kind of bewildered, but they're the most serious ones at the film, focus on their tasks. She's the one who's like, she doesn't know what the hell's going on. She doesn't live in a world of mysticism and stuff like that. So it's a nice type of character that has certain elements that are kind of nice, because she does have good chemistry with Richard E. Grant. They do have a nice rapport between the two of them in that regard. They just have a nice quality overall that brings the heart of the story forward. So you got Redfern doing that to the most part, but she kind of softens and kind of comes around and stuff like that, and kind of devotes herself to the kind of journey and quest and stuff like that as it goes along. She's a bit of the conduit character in the film, because we got all this stuff that we don't know anything about, but we need to know about it. And so Redfern has to impart that upon her, so the audience understands what he's doing and what all this stuff is about the magic and the mysticism and all the different little tools he has to kind of hunt down the Warlock. It's a nice type of thing. It's like, it's just smart. simple writing in that regard to get that conduit character in there to understand all these supernatural, paranormal, interesting little things you got going on with these characters and the backstory in that regard. So she does a nice job to hold what she needs to in the film. She's not terribly fleshed out. A few little things dropped here and there, like, oh, I had like 2 years of high school, and she's kind of some kind of like stray or whatnot. She's just kind of someone who kind of bums around town, or probably something like that. Like I said, a party girl who's not really concerned about too much in the world in that regard. So it's an interesting little character. Doesn't get nearly as much exploration as you'd want to for a character with a little more substance to it, as this film's been kind of compared off to the Terminator, where there's a hero and a villain kind of travel through time. This one woman's kind of caught in the middle of the whole thing. She's no Sarah Connor. She's no Linda Hamilton in the film, but I think Miner does a good job kind of making all these elements fit together. And of course, you can have two great actors, but if you don't kind of get all the different qualities together, all the qualities of the characters and the story, and tell them what the tone is and how to move this entire story along, it doesn't come together as well. But you have to give it to Steve Miner to kind of have found these talents, brought them into the entire thing, get them enticed to the whole thing, and get this work ethic and get that quality out of them, and kind of work with them on the characters to get them exactly where they need to be, so everything gels together very nicely. So I think Miner did a very nice job with the cast here, and just casting it overall did a very exceptional job in that regard. And the musical score for the entire film was put together by the legendary Jerry Goldsmith, because if you got $15 million in 1988, you could definitely afford Jerry Goldsmith. But it's got a very interesting score, because there's some very moody and effective cues throughout the entire film that really hit the button on the horror moments in the entire film. Also some very nice action cues that kind of drive forward the thrills and the momentum of the film overall. It doesn't really play in the kind of lighter elements of the entire film, the levity and stuff like that here and there. Focuses on the tone of the drama and the horror and the suspense overall, and does a very good job of that entire thing. It doesn't kind of reach beyond the scale of the film. It doesn't make it huge and operatic like it's The Omen or whatnot. It kind of plays to the level the film is on, but kind of does stuff to complement it, kind of accentuate certain elements. But I feel like there's some points of instrumentation that don't quite really kind of hit the right chord for me. Because he's got a theme for Redfern, one for the Warlock, and there's kind of, I don't know if it's a woodwind or a synthesizer kind of mimicking a woodwind or whatnot that plays along. This kind of nasally, kind of small, quaint sound that sounds a little cheap to me. I hate to say that about a Goldsmith score, because the man was just a master. Absolutely think there's piles of scores I absolutely adore from this man, from Alien, the Rambo films, the Star Trek films, and all these other things, the Mummy, and all these other things. Like, the guy was masterful. This one was always been kind of one that was never like top echelon. No one really kind of talked about this one terribly much. It was never really in the conversation about the ones you really had to talk about or really had to get and stuff like that. It does well for the film. Some things that it goes back and forth between really nice mixes of orchestral and synthesizer cues, these kind of weird, kind of lighter moments, whatnot, with these kind of weird instrumentation, like I said, overall, that always kind of struck me as kind of sounding not that great. So it's just a choice that made the film maybe okay for other people. Just kind of always kind of like, it's not the best sign I want to get out of the film right now. I want to get something that's a little bit more interesting, a little more creepy, a little more ominous in some places here. And there's a little kind of nasally woodwindy sound or whatnot that comes in, and it's like, that's not really doing anything positive for me in the moment here. But the thing was released on like LP and CD way back in the day by Intrada, who have been around that long in the US, and then Silva Screen Records did it over in the UK. But apparently there's a lot of cues and layers and stuff like that and tracks in the entire thing that really didn't get incorporated into those masters. But eventually there was an expanded version that I think is available on digital services, but is also available still on vinyl right now through Intrada, but not on CD. But it has expanded stuff, and it has all the proper cues with all the proper pieces of instrumentation, all the little things they had, all the little nuances and whatnot. So it's back to much more of the proper film version. So if you're interested in it, you can grab it up on iTunes and Amazon Music and all the other places you want to grab music and listen to things and subscribe to things. Or like I said, you can grab it on vinyl if you're that much interested in it. But it's been around for about 10 years on vinyl, and it hasn't sold out. So probably not a huge seller, because like I said, it's not on the top echelons of the Gary Goldsmith pantheon of scores. but still something that'd be interesting if you're enough of a fan of the film, you're very much interested in the music of it. Definitely out there to experience it for yourself, but interesting things on the effects front for the entire film here, because with the visual effects, they originally brought in DreamQuest Images, and these guys, they had worked on Blade Runner, Gremlins, Short Circuit, The Lost Boys, Predator, Elm Street 3 and 4, going to work on The Abyss, and Total Recall. So these guys definitely in demand, could definitely deliver some very high quality stuff. And they worked on some of the flying sequences for the Warlock, but then they got pushed out because of budgetary reasons. And they brought in Perpetual Motion, a different team, to work on the rest of the film. And I don't have any problems really with the visual effects. Some of the stuff is maybe a little, not the best, most dynamic things you could possibly get. But I like the entire thing, especially I like the entire thing of when the Warlock is reading through the Grand Grimoire, and it gets the entire that fiery ectoplasm, and kind of shoots it around and stuff like that. The rotoscoping effects are very, very nice. Like, it's really impressive. Like, even back today, some people, when this got released in '91, some people kind of praised the effects overall. Like, some of the stuff was very surprising to some people. And they got some mad pings in there, and some other optical posits here and there. But I think the visual effects are pretty nice. Nothing really kind of stands out as like, oh, that's an eyesore. Oh, that didn't hold up, whatnot. So the flying stuff kind of zooms by real fast. You don't really kind of see much of a detail overall to kind of criticize it too much. So I think they did a pretty nice job overall getting the entire film up on its feet in that regard. But the makeup effects are not quite so good. Because, I mean, like, 88, there's a load of fucking effects guys all over the place. But most of them are probably working on the Blob, or Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Master, or Phantasm 2, or Friday the 13th Part 7, or Child's Play, or some other film here and there. And so probably nobody left to call on while they're shooting this film. And so not really kind of knock the guys who worked on the entire thing, but in general, they're not that great. Now, they did have some issues overall with the entire thing with Laurie Singer when she gets hexed by the Warlock, where she's going to age 2 decades over each day, and she's got all this old age makeup on her, and she's a little difficult with the entire makeup effects guys. Like, she wouldn't wear the prosthetics, all the stuff they kind of put on the face and stuff like that to apply overall. And so they kind of had to work around it and do some like little stippling and some other little things here and there, but they really couldn't make it look like proper old age makeup. So it's a little kind of not great overall what they had to work around and kind of not do as much as they wanted to do in that regard. But even by the end of the film, where the Warlock got stabbed with the salt water and he's starting to bubble up and stuff like that, it's like, it looks kind of rubbery. It doesn't look very convincing. Like, the ideas are good, but the implementation and the quality of what you put on there, like, it just doesn't look quite as convincing as very good makeup effects in that regard. And of course, they also cut a lot of stuff out of that film, because apparently when the film was being screened for certain people in '88, when they're doing like the scoring sessions and various other things and kind of getting out in different places here, by they got it out in '91 in the US, a lot of things have been cut out of the film. Now there's certain effect sequences like with Mary Warnoff, who portrayed the Channeler in the film. She was originally had this entire thing where like her entire chest would kind of like burst out, and they had this entire appliance on her, and the nipples of her chest would turn into eyes that he would kind of, the Warlock would kind of carve out or whatnot and use as his things here and there, as his Zamiel, his Satan or whatnot, as kind of channeled through her and stuff like that, to kind of give him this kind of guide to where all the pages of the Grand Grimoire are. Apparently, like, Steve Miner was like, oh, this is going to kill or whatnot and stuff like that, but then eventually like, oh, this didn't work. We had to cut it because it just did. We had a test screen and people were laughing. It wasn't working at all. So they cut that entire scene out. There's a little bit of something in it, in the trailer, where like she crusts over and turns to ice or whatnot, and then kind of smashes her face or something else like that. It was a very ambitious sequence, but these guys were not up to the task to make it look that good. Or maybe the entire concept didn't quite work, but overall, the execution just didn't fall in the right places. However, at the end of the film, when Cassandra injects the salt water into the Warlock and he bursts into flames, fantastic fire stunt. And they did a really fantastic animatronic for it, and great makeup on it. Like, had all this articulation, it would kind of move, and all that type of stuff. So, like, the entire sequence there does a fantastic job to show off some really good payoff for killing off the Warlock at the end of the film with a fantastic piece of effect in that regard. But, like I said, apparently a lot of the more gory stuff got cut from the film. I could definitely see when you get up and shooting this thing in 88, Miner knew there were certain things you could not have gotten away with. Like showing the kid getting killed. MPA was going to axe that, because this is the age where, like, Friday the 13th Part 7 is getting hacked to base by the MPA. Like, there's no gore in the film, almost at all. By the time you get to Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, there's, like, not even an opportunity to show gore, even as they filmed that thing. So, Miner knew the entire temperament of the time. Like, the MPA will lean in everything that's very, very gory, anything that's too far, we're not going to get it even into the film whatsoever. So, shot around certain things, but apparently there's other stuff that got shot, that got cut, and stuff like that. So I could definitely see the fact that it might not feel like it's enough of a gory film, that there's certain things, like I said, they're implied. They're kind of like put off the entire film, like old characters are seeing stuff, but we're not really seeing it. And maybe some things could go a little further with the blood and everything like that, but like I said, if you're not going to show the stuff, you need to have those actors who can really convey those qualities about what they're capable of doing without actually having to show that much of what they actually are doing. So it's a nice balancing act in that regard, knowing that you couldn't rely as much on blood and gore in 1988 when they're shooting the entire thing. You had to rely on the quality of the actors, the performances, and the story to carry it overall. So I think that does very well. And in general, Warlock's a pretty cool film. Like, I discovered it back in like mid-late 90s or whatnot, but it's always something that I always really gravitated towards. Like, it's always been maintained as a good film for me all these years. And it's like, I bought it on one of those VHS tapes where they had like the super long play mode where the tracking didn't do very well and the quality wasn't as good, but I still hung on to it because it took forever to get a really good release of this thing on home media, because like there was no widescreen Laserdisc, there's no widescrreen VHS, there's no widescreen DVD, and I waited for the Blu-ray in 2017 where they put the whole 3 films on one set in that regard to really get a nice thing. I even bought it on iTunes before that just to have an HD widescreen copy of the whole thing. So it's a film I've always liked. Like the fact is, I covered this thing like 12 years ago on the channel, which was a very short video. It had pretty consistent opinions on it, but I felt like there was so much more to really say about Warlock and some of the things involved with the entire franchise we have here, because they made sequels. The thing was so profitable for Trimark, picking up for nothing. Sure, why not? Decent hit in the box office, nice video rentals and sales, take it on the whole thing. Go ahead and make another one. So they did make Warlock the Armageddon. And I never really liked this one. Like, I didn't rewatch it going up this video. It was like, I always felt like this one just like, it lost the seriousness of the first film. It kind of went off more silly, a little bit more cheesy in a certain way. And that's kind of the thing for director Anthony Hickox, who took up Warlock the Armageddon, because he had done like Hellraiser 3, which a large part of that film feels very cheesy to me. Some good dramatic beats and storylines and everything, but when he gets into Cenobites at the end of the thing, and there's a one with CDs in his head and stuff like that, like you've lost everything the first 2 films built up as a very ominous, dark commentary on human pleasures and desires and sinful, lustful type of stuff. Like everything Clive Barker was really pouring hefty in those first 2 films just got soured in that third film. I think it's really bad. You don't like the Waxwork films he did, but never really caught on with me, and I just felt like Warlock the Armageddon just like Sands is so fantastic. He's even more comfortable in the role, more confident, more relishing the whole thing. But the problem is he doesn't have that counterbalance. He's going up against a bunch of kids in some podunk town who are being trained by some descendants of druids or something else like that, that you teenage kids, you gotta go up against the Warlock. You're the ones who can stop them. It's like, it's such an off counterbalance. You know, I like Paula Marshall, but Anthony Hickox doesn't seem to be able to use Paula Marshall to a very good extent, either in Warlock 2 or Hellraiser 3. Anything like that, but it's not a good of a story. It's not a good handle on the material overall that Steve Miner brought to the entire first film, that had that gravity, that had that seriousness, had that weight to it, had that heart overall. And this one kind of just loses it and kind of makes it more colorful, flashy, but doesn't really make it as good of a story and doesn't make it as good of a film in that regard. Then they made a third film, didn't have anything to do with Julian Sands. Apparently he did read a script for it and found it was very much not a very good script. And so he didn't sign on for it. So they got Bruce Payne, who had done like very good work, I feel, in Passenger 57. It does okay work in the entire film as this Warlock in a story that has absolutely jack shit at all to do with the first film or the second film whatsoever. But it's a story involving a Warlock that has nothing to do with the other two films, and just like it just goes off in places. It's got Ashley Lawrence again from the Hellraiser franchise in the whole thing. But it's a pretty cheap film. I think Payne's okay, Lawrence is okay. Payne gets much worse in much later films like Highlander, Endgame, and Dungeons and Dragons. He's okay in the entire film. He's got a good sense of trying to still being villainous and kind of serious and kind of have a weight to him in the entire film, but ultimately you can probably pass on it. You can watch it on Tubi or YouTube, stuff like that. It's not hard to find, but it's not all that much worthwhile to watch. The first film is the best film. Absolutely, 100%, because you have the quality of Redfern and the Warlock, the counterbalance of the two characters and the whole thing, and the fantastic actors bringing that to the screen, and a very good handle on direction and tone. I think the first Warlock is a really solid piece of work that, if anyone hasn't seen it, I definitely say go check it out. I definitely say check it out, because those, if you might feel like, oh, it's not quite as flashy, it doesn't quite look as modern, it might not have as much dazzling effects or kind of the gore to it, but get invested in the story. Focus in on those characters, and they really do pull through the film. Like, they're just, it breezes by too. It's like a 100-minute film, and it just goes by really, really easily. And just like, I could watch Granting Sands play these characters all day long, over and over again. But we only got this one film with the two of them apparently, and they do fantastic work, and it's definitely worth watching and enjoying in that regard. So guys, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the first Warlock, and especially how you felt about the sequels in that regard and all that type of stuff. And was this Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis video game put out around the time of the sequel? If you played it, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. I never came across it myself, but it exists out in their world. And there are also some comic books that came out, I think around 2009 or so. Weird type of thing after the franchise has been kind of totally dormant. But they put those out, and they don't have anything too deeply involved in the entire other films, but as you go in the entire franchise. Anything like that, guys. So definitely like to hear your thoughts on the entire thing, and post it below, and definitely give me a thumbs up on that video, especially a super thanks feature if you especially enjoyed anything here on the channel. You can also support us on Patreon, and of course sharing the links around, subscribing if you haven't. All that stuff does very good things for the channel, keep us healthy, and let us know what you guys enjoy so we can keep making more of that stuff for you guys. So guys, thanks much, take care, bye bye.